Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast. This is a new series, The Doctor is In. We'll be focusing and discussing understandings and developments in the field of psychology. This is episode 177. I'm Chris Hadnagy, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, as well as the Institute for Social Engineering, and a professor of social engineering at University of Arizona. And I've been doing this podcast since 2009, but this new series I'm co-hosting with Abbie Maroño, Dr. Abbie Maroño.
Thank you. I am Dr. Abbie Maroño. I'm the Director of Education at Social Engineer. I'm a perception management coach and a lecturer in psychology. I have a PhD in behavior analysis and psychology, and I specialize in nonverbal communication, trust, and cooperation.
Hence the doctor part. You are the doctor part. Just to make sure we make everyone clear, that is not me. I am not the doctor part of The Doctor is In. I'm the in part. That's it. No, I don't even know what I am. I'm nothing. Anyhow, if you're looking for anything to do with social engineering services, you need to check out our brand new website. I know I've been saying it for the last few episodes, but I'm really proud of the new website, social-engineer.com. Check it out. It was just redone. It's really beautifully redone, but makes it everything much more clear. When you come to the website, you can find out how we can help your company with phishing, or any type of social engineering vectors that you want to be protected against. And we have a lot of education there too in our blog. So check it out, whether you're looking for training, ongoing services, or adversarial simulations, social-engineer.com. Also, if you really like the topic of social engineering, you should check out our Slack channel. We have over 1,200 people in there now, and we're discussing things like psychology, like we will be on this podcast, or sometimes we have people in the practitioner side of the field that come in and want to talk about pretexts. We've had a job board in there. Over 8 people have found work because they come into the Slack channel, and companies have posted jobs there. So it's a really great place to come, very family friendly. So if you're looking for a nice place to discuss things, all things social engineering, you can get the link in our show notes, or you can follow me on the Human Hacker Twitter account. And if you don't see it there, just ping me and I'll make sure you get the link to the Slack channel. I also want to invite everyone to check out innocentlivesfoundation.org. I cannot be prouder of the team over there. I said this a couple episodes ago, but I was just shocked when I think about when we first started ILF. That first year, we did 9 cases, and we focus on helping law enforcement track people who are trafficking children or creating child abuse material. And now at our 5th year, we just completed 450 cases. I am just so proud of the team there and what they're doing. You can check out the website to find out our mission and how you can help, either through volunteering your talents and time, or you can donate money to help our mission there. And it's at innocentlivesfoundation.org. Speaking of that, one of our board members, Neil Fallon, who is the lead singer of the best rock and roll band on the planet Earth, which you should definitely listen to, which is Clutch. You can check them out at pro-rock.com. They allow us to have one of their songs as our opening music. So if you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify or somewhere else, you can hear some of the greatest rock and roll music on the planet Earth. You check them out. They're on tour now. You should go see them. We might actually be together at a show. Anyhow, let's start talking about our topic here. So, Abbie, we came up with this idea of having a podcast that focused on psychology, but not social engineering, particularly.
Yes. Yes, not social engineering.
Why are we going this route?
So, psychology reaches every person in every career. Psychology is important for everything we do, every relationship we have, including those with ourselves, romantic, professional, friendships. An understanding of psychology is beneficial to every aspect of our lives. So if we want to learn about anything, I'm biased given my PhD is psychology, but I think psychology is the best subject in the world to learn about.
Well, I don't have a PhD in anything, but I'm also biased because I think this is a great topic. I think for me, once I started in this field, understanding even little bits about psychology helped me to understand people so much better. And since you are the doctor and the doctor is in, you're choosing the topic. So what's our topic for today?
So I thought I would kick off the first ever episode with Subliminal Persuasion. And I wanted to do subliminal persuasion because when we think of psychology, or anytime I say to anybody that I do psychology, the first thing I'm asked is, can you read my mind? Are you a mind reader? And when we think about subliminal persuasion, it's that, getting inside people's heads and tricking them. And there's so many myths and misunderstandings around this field. But it's so interesting, the actual science of it. I thought if we're going to start with something, it's got to be subliminal persuasion.
I really like this topic because I've, as a professional social engineer, I hit that same thing all the time where you meet someone and they automatically think that you're just going to trick them or dupe them into agreeing with you or doing something. I can't get away from it, especially in the non-infosec world. When I just hang out with my friends or I meet new people and they hear what I do, they're like, "Oh no, I don't even want to talk to you. You're just going to get me to do things." Is it really that easy? Can you just do that?
Let's start with what is subliminal persuasion, just for anybody that doesn't know. So subliminal persuasion is the act of subliminally presenting stimuli, so out of the conscious awareness. And it's intended to influence feelings, thoughts, and actions. And subliminal persuasion has to alter behavior. So if I present you, say, a picture of a sad face, with the aim of making you feel sad unconsciously, that's not subliminal persuasion, that's subliminal priming, which is part of persuasion. Persuasion has to alter your actual behavior, not just intention to behave, but the actual behavior. So that is what subliminal persuasion is. Can we do it? Well, there is a famous quote from the book called The Power of Subliminal that I just love. And it says, in the field of subliminal perception and persuasion, scientists agree that the field is controversial and argue over everything else. Because there is so much contradictory literature here, and that it just really, really sums up what we know about the field. But there was that famous study that kind of kicked off the interest. And I think this is the one that most people think about when they think about subliminal persuasion. Is there was a man, James Vickery, and it was back in 1957. And he had adverts. And he said that he'd presented the word Coca-Cola or the word popcorn subliminally. So subliminally, really, really quickly, without conscious awareness that we're seeing or hearing those words. And then he managed to sell more Coca-Cola and more popcorn. And that created this outrage of people, oh my God, he's tricking me. He's getting inside my mind and making me buy things. It turned out that he never actually presented the words Coca-Cola or popcorn. They did an investigation and there was no actual effect of it because he wasn't doing it. He was just saying that he did to sell popcorn and Coca-Cola, not subliminally, through the conscience. And there's been, after that, there was a lot of people selling things like self-help tapes. And a lot of us have, played them at night. If you have an exam, you might listen to yourself talk about the research or the work, or play a tape at night and just hope that you wake up smart and know all of the answers.
Hasn't worked for me.
There's really...
It hasn't worked for me. I've been trying for I've been trying for 40 something years, and I'm not any smarter, so it's not working.
I tried to do that with learning a language, and then I woke up and, funnily enough, I still couldn't speak the language. Yeah. But we see this with stop smoking as well. There's loads. There's a huge market of self-help and stop smoking tapes that you play at night. But again, there was research done showing no significant effect whatsoever. People that listened to those at night showed, no improvement. And there was another famous study, Chris, the Judas priest lawsuit. Do you know the lawsuit with the back?
No,
messages?
I haven't heard of this.
Okay. So this was another really famous one that has, again, really contributed to the myths in subliminal persuasion. And it's so ridiculous. But so Judas Priest are a band, and they were, they had a lawsuit filed against them because two men had committed suicide.
I heard about that story. Yeah. Yes.
The parents thought that in their songs, if you listen to it backwards, they put subliminal messages saying, let's be dead. And they, like I said, they actually filed a lawsuit. This band then worked with researchers, and when research was done, studying the effects of backwards messages, and surprisingly, there was no effect of backward messages in songs on behavior. So it all came to a big, halt, that these subliminal messages and songs don't actually alter behavior. But the lingering effects of those studies and the popcorn and Coca-Cola ones is what we see in kind of the public understanding of subliminal messages and subliminal persuasion.
So let me ask this. I remember in the 90s, there was this uproar, Coca-Cola commercial. So it was a printed ad, and you see the cup of Coca-Cola with the ice and it looks so refreshing, but someone had figured out that in the ice, there was the word sex. Like and it was supposed to be, using sex to sell Coca-Cola. And there was I remember this whole thing. Yeah. So is stuff like that real, or is that part of the myths that we have?
So, I mean, it can be real that people are doing it, but the effects of it, there doesn't seem to be any evidence. I mean, anybody can present stimuli, right, and anybody could do that study themselves, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be effective. But there is, and I said that scientists agree that it's controversial. So there is obviously evidence on the other side of things that there is an effect. And many of us have heard of the mere exposure effect, that if we are around something enough, whether we're in close proximity or we just see someone, if you see someone a lot, you're more likely to like them because it's continuous exposure. It's a mere exposure effect. There has been research done showing that subliminally presented stimuli has a mere exposure effect too. So if I present something to you regularly, subliminally, you prefer it than something else because of the mere exposure effect. There has also been some studies done looking at political views and where they prime people with certain words before they vote, and it changes their voting behavior. There's also studies done looking at product choice. So if we repeatedly subliminally expose people to brand names, it can create a bias in their product choices when they shop. So there is evidence of a subliminal effect. And a lot of people don't believe in this unconscious because they say, well, my unconscious can't drive my behavior. And when we think of the unconscious, we think of Freud. We think, Freud was a crazy psychologist. Freud wasn't a psychologist. And then although Freud might have had some crazy ideas, the idea of the unconscious is founded in science. It's founded in neuroscience. It's founded in every aspect of personality and social psychology. And we do know that our unconscious drives our behavior. If the room is hot, you're more likely to rate people as warm. If the room is cold, you're more likely to rate them as cold. If you're holding a warm drink, you're more likely to rate people positively. If you're holding a cold drink, you're more likely to rate them as cold. That is an unconscious effect because you don't think, I'm holding a coffee, right, so I like you. Whereas when I hold my smoothie, I don't like you. It's unconsciously driven. So we do know that the unconscious is driving effects. So it's not the unconscious, and it's not that there is no effect, but obviously something else is going on, that there is some misunderstanding there that we're not registering. And when the original studies were done of subliminal persuasion, obviously it started very, very early. I said back to the 1950s, 1960s, and then there was a big wave of it in the 1980s. Back then, we were very limited with what we could do because we didn't have the technology and the neuroscience that we do now. Because now when we present stimuli, we can actually see if the brain is registering it. And this is huge for the field because if we can unconsciously register something, we need to see some neural activation to that stimuli without conscious recognition of it, because that will show us that we are actually subliminally recognizing this stimuli. So the advancement of technology has allowed us to really dive into this field. And and has produced some really, really interesting findings now because we can explore it biologically.
Let's delve into the one thing you said. I want to know, is there correlation to why holding something hot that people will generally rate people higher and cold lower?
You know, it's interesting. There's a lot of debate on that. And it tends to be this general warmth versus cold, these two dimensions, that when we rate people as warm, it's because that we're warm, and same with cold. And there's got to be a physiological aspect to it, but it's not entirely understood why we have these two warm and cold dimensions. I mean, I've read a lot of different research about, activating the nervous system, that when we're cold, we're more kind of protected and we're more likely to go into that fight or flight. But then there's also other research saying, well, that's rubbish. So that itself is a field of exploration. And I think that would in itself be a topic that we could discuss for a very long time. Yeah.
It's fascinating to me because, like when you said that, the one thing I thought of, which I know is not related, but just made me think of it. I heard from a psychologist that if you're experiencing like an anxiety attack or a panic attack, if you were to take like an ice cube or an ice pack and rub it like on the sides of your nose here, that it can actually have an effect on reducing your anxiety. Something about triggering the parasympathetic. What is that? What's
the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one that calms us down.
Which is fascinating to me, but that's cold, right? And yet, if we're cold, we'll tend to, and that's to reduce anxiety. But now, if I'm holding something cold,
that's because when we're anxious, we often get really, really hot. So, we have homeostasis. We need to stay at a very constant temperature. So it would make sense why cooling us down would calm us down, because it brings us back to that happy medium.
Interesting.
It would be the same as if we're, freezing cold. Like a lot of the time people get really nervous when they're in a fearful situation and you see them go pale, you see them go cold. In that situation, warming them up would have the same effect. But it's also interesting, like seasonal affective disorder, the temperature of the environment affects our mental health as well. So this warm and cold thing is an unconscious effect massively, because all of these effects, we don't have any control over. Obviously, when we go into things like panic attacks, that's, slightly going out of this realm. But when we talk about the temperature of our body, our hand, of the general environment, those change our moods. They change how we rate people. They change how we think about ourselves. They change our mental health, all unconsciously. We don't wake up and go, it's a bit warmer today, so I'm going to feel slightly better than I felt yesterday, and my mental health will be a bit better. We don't make that mental decision to do so. It's kind of just our bodies make that decision for us, and then that's how we feel.
So what I'm hearing is that next time I teach a class, I need to give everyone a cup of coffee before I give them the ending survey. So I say, hey, take this survey and here, hold this coffee while you're doing it, and I'll get higher ratings. Yeah.
Or you could just turn up the temperature of the room to a comfortable temperature, which is probably a lot cheaper to do.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that's probably good. But I don't know. I like the coffee idea. It just seems like a great way to get higher ratings, and then we're all drinking coffee and people are putting 5s on there. It's good. So there's not really a debate from psychologists on if subliminal persuasion exists. They all believe it exists, but just how it's applied. Is that what you're saying?
So there's no debate that subliminal priming works, that we can be subliminally affected by stimuli. Persuasion is a slightly controversial topic, but it's important that we kind of discuss first the fact that we can register the stimuli, because there is research done that when we show someone a happy face or a fearful face for 33 milliseconds, so that's too quick to register it consciously, and then we mask it. So we show them this fearful or happy face, and then instantly a neutral face is in the way, because what that does is stop any processing of that previous stimuli. And when we do that and we look at people's brains using fMRI machines, we see amygdala activation for the fearful face and not the happy face. So it does show that it is neurologically registering. However, there was really interesting research done on the galvanic skin response that shows that even though we register it unconsciously, it's not always the case that we do. And the galvanic skin response, I won't get into too much detail here, but basically it's a change in the electrical resistance of the skin. When we have emotional stress or any kind of stress, our synthetic nervous system changes our skin conductance. And you can measure that with electrodes. And that's what's measured on, lie detector tests. When they say they're measuring lies, they're measuring galvanic skin response. So this electrical conductance, two different things, but that's another topic. And research has shown that when we are subliminally presented with a fearful stimulus, we have galvanic skin response related to increased stress automatically, but only if attention was paid. So even though we don't consciously register it, if we're not paying attention and trying to focus on the thing in front of us, there is no biological effect. So obviously it's not just a priming effect. There's something else going on here. And, now we've discussed the fact that there needs to be some kind of attention paid.
But what about cases like, I was reading a study about like shopping malls who will put scents, like certain type of smells and odors inside their air conditioning ducts, and it can trigger hunger or the comfort. So I'm in this store and I smell lavender. Now I want to stay here for longer. Or a certain music that will make people have buying desires, or, I want to go to this restaurant. I mean, I don't know if they have these in the UK, but there's like this pretzel place here called Auntie Anne's or something like that.
Yeah.
And they have a very distinct smell to their pretzels. And as soon as you walk into a mall, if they haven't, you can smell it all over the place. And it's like, you smell it and right away your brain goes, I want a dang pretzel now.
Yeah. So I'm so glad that you said this, because this is such a good point. With our senses, smell is the most powerful, because all of our senses, other than the olfactory sense, which is the sense of smell, they go through the cortex and then to the amygdala. Sense of smell, that olfactory sense, goes to the amygdala first.
Really?
And then goes to the cortex. Yes. So when we hear music and we go, oh, what's that? And then you're like, oh, that's what it is, because it goes through memory and then it goes to emotion. With smell, we smell something and we feel a way. And then we're like, oh, that's what it is. So the sense of smell is a really good way to prime people. Can you motivate behavior with it, though? That's very interesting. And this has led to a lot of debate because, as we've now discussed, there's no argument that there is a priming effect. There's no argument that there is a biological effect given certain conditions. Some of the arguments around why we are seeing inconsistency is because some researchers say that the subliminal messages are indirectly affecting behavior. So when we see the subliminal message, it activates concepts and alters how we feel, and then how we interpret people's behavior because of how we feel. And that creates the behavior change, not the actual stimulus. It's kind of a secondary thing. So, for example, if I go back to that priming people with like a fearful face, you might then interpret people's actions more negatively and then act a certain way. So it's not that negative face that's caused the behavior. It's that indirect effect, which is an interesting argument. But there was a recent study done that actually might explain why we are seeing these inconsistent effects to a greater degree. And I really, really like this research. And it says that there's so much discrepancy because people are not setting the right conditions. So the conditions are that to be effective in subliminal persuasion, certain conditions have to be met. And these conditions are the priming has to be goal relevant and the person being primed has to be motivated to pursue that goal. So if, let's go to the original study that basically presented this idea. And they said if we present people with the concept of thirst, it will activate thirst-related cognitions. But if these people are already thirsty, it will appeal to them more to then present stimuli or present a product that says it's thirst quenching, because they've already got a goal-related behavior. They've got a goal-related drive there. If these people are hungry and then you prime them with the word thirst, it's not priming the relevant variables, basically. If you prime them with hunger, you're more likely to affect their behavior there. But just priming a relevant goal isn't enough, because we have loads of goals, and it wouldn't be evolutionary advantageous to pursue every single goal if it was primed. We would never stop buying things. I mean, I already buy too much on Amazon. So if priming was that strong, yeah, I'm aware
I'm an Amazon
of your Amazon
junkie
habits.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, but if priming was that strong to change our behavior every time we were priming something, like I said, we'd never stop shopping. So the final criteria is that we need to be motivated to pursue that goal. And there was a study that I think we both looked at, and it covers these two criteria. So if we first prime people with a negative mood and then try to sell them a mood restoring product, that meets the first criteria of being goal relevant. However, unless that person is motivated to restore their mood, the persuasion won't be effective. We can have the relevant prime. Yep. But if they think, I'm sad, I want to stay sad, that mood restoring product is going to be ineffective.
Yeah.
If they have that motivation, it will be a lot more effective.
What about belief though? Like how much does belief pay into that? Like, so if I feel sad and I want to not be sad anymore, but I don't believe that this product actually could work, does that affect my motivation to be subliminally primed?
No, because the motivation has to come from you. So you don't necessarily have to have any belief in the product itself. I mean, that would be contribute to the motivation to buy the product. And what you might then do is just buy a different product that does the same thing if you don't have any belief in that product. Mm-hmm. But what they might be then doing is, priming you and motivating you to buy someone else's product. So as long as they make theirs appealing and you're motivated to do so, then there's no reason that you wouldn't be motivated to buy theirs. If you have, and this is also why reputation is really important, because if a company has a negative reputation, all those effects to try and get you to buy them, they're tainted because you have that belief. So that motivation to get you to buy their product could just get you motivated to buy a competitor's product.
Okay, I want to go back to this olfactory thing, because I actually follow me on this, because I may be way off base, but this is fascinating. Okay. Way back in episode 49 of this podcast, I had Neil Fallon on the show, and we started talking about how he had this one show that was like when they started off, it was like the best show of his life. Like he went out, he nailed everything. The crowd was great. And he came up with this idea that he was going to take that shirt from that show and save it in a plastic bag. And he would smell it before the next show, the next night. And it would it amped him up. Right. So I was like, I wonder, we talked about olfactory senses and things like that. And then I went and started doing some research and saying, I wonder how scientific that method is. And I found this piece of research that what they did is they took a group of people and they attached sweat pads to them. And they had them
I think I know what you're
jump out of an airplane, right? So with parachutes, but they went skydiving. And then they attached sweat pads to another group of people and had them run on a treadmill. Then they took all those sweat pads and they took research subjects and they attached an fMRI helmet to them, and they had them, which sounds like a really nasty job, smell each of the sweat pads. And they registered what part of their brains were active as they smelled these sweat pads. And every time they got to one from a plane jumper, it registered that fear in that amygdala center. They registered fear. But when they smelled the one from the treadmill, there was no real brain reaction. It was just like, oh, that smells bad. And that was it. And the science behind that was how, like, even our olfactory senses could even affect us in smelling a pheromone or smelling an emotion somehow. And that could affect our decision-making ability. Has that science been solid?
Yes. So solid, no.
Okay.
Again, it is contradictory. Anything in the realm of unconscious is always a bit contradictory. And pheromones particularly are very contradictory. But when we are in certain emotional states, our pheromones obviously change slightly with our extra emotion, with that anxiety. But there is research to show that there is a pheromone effect. Like the study I thought you were going to say is there were researchers, and it was a group of men were asked to keep on these t-shirts and sweat in them and not take them off, and then give them to women. And basically there's certain genes that kind of, I'm not going to get too much into the neuroscience of it, but match up. So if one man has a particular type, it matches a particular type that a woman has. And they wanted the women to smell their men's t-shirts and say which shirt they were most attracted to. And what they found was that these gene expressions, when they paired, they were more likely to find that t-shirt more attractive.
The person wearing the t-shirt?
No, just the t-shirt itself.
Okay.
They were asked which t-shirt they preferred.
Okay.
So they never saw the person.
Okay.
So it was all smell. However, what did affect it was if the women were on contraception, and what contraception, because that changes our pheromones, because it changes our hormones. And again, they didn't smell it and think, I prefer this smell because it's consistent with my gene expression.
Yeah.
They just go, I prefer this one. It's an unconscious effect. And there's so much research done on subliminal priming of visual and auditory senses. And it's missing a trick because, like I said, the olfactory sense goes to the amygdala first. So if you and that's what we're trying to do with priming. We're trying to trigger an emotional response. We want to trigger a behavioral change. So we really want to get that emotion and that drive. Olfactory is a great way to do that. And then you create that motivation to do so. So I can imagine, I imagine that there is a lot of studies out there looking at the olfactory sense and priming. But I haven't seen many looking at the olfactory sense and persuasion per se.
So let's try to make some application to this, because that's, something we've always do on our podcast. Yep. Like my brain, of course, goes right away to, social engineering, but we can make application to this, it seems like, in everyday life. If, regardless if it's controversial or not, if we know that our appearance and our smell can affect people's opinion of us greatly, then we probably want to give a lot more thought to that when we're doing things where we need to have the other person actually feeling good about us, like let's say a job interview or a date or something like that.
Yeah, so that's a good point. If you know that your partner has had an ex who wears a specific scent, try not to wear that scent, because you can prime them to have a specific emotional response. And if you want, say, your partner to think about you when they're away, spray your scent on their pillow. We know that, when we miss someone, often we take their t-shirt and smell it. And there's that thing, I miss how they smell. And it really is such a strong effect. So yeah, do not wear the same spray as somebody's ex.
Yeah, that's good advice. And then for something like, let's say, a job interview, how would you determine the right amount of preparation for that, right? Like, how would you determine, man, I'm going on this job interview, it's okay to just have a shirt and nice pants, or I need a tie and a jacket, or I should have a dress? Or how do you determine what is there, can you overdo it and then create negative effect by your dress?
See, I think that would sit outside of the realm of subliminal persuasion, because the persuasion side of things and the subliminal, it's got to be relevant to that person. You're not trying to induce a certain mood to do so. you'd have to know what smells and what things appeal to that person, and you're not going to have that information. But going into a job interview, as nonverbals speak loud, we should be clean, smell good, don't overdo it with the spray, not for subliminal reasons, just for the fact that we don't like to be overpowered with scents. It creates a negative response because we are overpowered with that olfactory sense. And we don't like, too bright colors because, again, it's overpowering in the senses. So it's not subliminal, but that would just be, I guess, general advice for a job interview.
Okay. So then how would someone apply subliminal persuasion, or could they even apply it to a job interview?
I wouldn't recommend it. I think things like subliminal persuasion would be, they stick to things like marketing, and obviously we can do in interactions, but how do you present something to someone for 33 milliseconds and then disappear? And actually I'm really glad that you said that, because this is one of the issues with the research and subliminal persuasion. The fact that we're sat here now thinking, okay, well, how do we relate this to a real life context? Yeah. That's the issue. In the context of these studies, to have a subliminal message, we sit in front of a computer and we focus on this thing. All of the background stimuli is gone and we can measure the effect. That's not representative of real world. So if we see it in marketing, obviously, how do we know you're not going to turn around and call for a cup of tea or something? And because there's so much other stimuli around you, this has been one of the biggest issues with creating impact in this field of, okay, well, now we know there is a persuasion effect in the laboratory. Now, how do we take this to the interview room? How do we take this to a wider context? We can see it in adverts. Lots of studies have done it in adverts. And actually, we can see it in eating behavior, which I will go over in a second. But removing it from the laboratory isn't just as simple as understanding how it works now, and then it can just be translated. Because like I said, if I want you to feel positively about me, I could subliminally prime you with a happy face, but how am I going to get that face up quick enough and then put it back down? We've got to think of a more realistic interaction, because you'll see me move the face. But that's
could it be your face though? Could you use your face by having a true, like a real smile, activating the eyes, and I was just thinking, like in a Zoom call, we're on a video. Sometimes before people have their video up, they have a picture of themselves. And I've seen a few in meetings, where they're just they're huge smile, big smile on their face. And now it's almost like I'm expecting the person that's coming on camera to be the happiest person on earth, because I saw this picture of them just being so happy.
So that would be more emotional contagion. So when we see happiness, we want to be happy. For it to be subliminal, it has to be out of our conscious awareness. So say you flashed that before a Skype call, that would be, you could flash the word, hire me or something, before a job interview for 33 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds, so that it reaches unconscious awareness, but not conscious awareness. That would be, I probably wouldn't recommend that in case your computer crashes.
Yeah. And it's stuck on hire me.
But you could give it a try. That would fit the criteria, and the person would be motivated to find an employee. So you might meet those two criteria. So if you want to give that a try, let us know how it goes.
So it sounds like this area of psychology is not really easy to apply outside of the laboratory. It's not something that we're going to be able to come up with some utilization that we can pass off to people who are listening to say, hey, go try this, and it's going to work for you.
No, it's tricky. I did say I'd go back to the eating behavior thing, because there are some effects of this that we see in our daily lives. And once we're aware of them, we can change our habits slightly. I used to be a dieter. I would always try and think, okay, I need to eat healthy. I need to do this. This is really good for me. Now I just eat when I'm hungry, and I eat healthy, and I don't think about it. And we know from research that people who calorie count and restrict their food it basically increases this psychological hunger, what we call appetite. And, eating when we're not hungry, emotionally driven eating. And that creates this underlying motivation to pursue the goal to eat. So already there is a motivation criteria being met. Research has used this. And what they've done is subliminally prime people with the words eat and binge. And they've done it to calorie counters and restricted eaters. And then to people that just have, very psychologically healthy attitudes towards food. And what they found is because of that underlying motivation that the restricting causes to eat, those people who are trying to diet are more likely to be persuaded to actually go and eat. So we do see effects of this in our everyday lives that we're not consciously aware that we're being subliminally primed and persuaded.
Okay. See, I was hoping that in this episode, we would uncover some magical secret that would help everyone learn how to use subliminal persuasion to their benefit. But I guess it's not that easy. So I guess the answer to that very first topic that we talked about was, no, you're not going to be able to read our minds. And we're not going to be able to persuade people to believe that we can read their minds just because of some subliminal triggers.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's very subtle as well. People think that psychology shouts in your face and you can read their mind. And it's not. It's, slight nudges in one direction. If I just prime you with a certain word, actually, there has been some research done that priming with a picture and a word is more effective than priming with just a word. And that actually increases the longevity of the persuasion. So when we talk about these lab studies, we look at the persuasion almost instantly after the study's done. And that doesn't last very long. If you see an advert on TV, you're not going to be at the shop. You're going to be in your house. And research has shown that when we prime people with a picture and a word, because we then have to pair them, so it creates this relational processing in the brain, which means that it goes to the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is really, really good at storing long-term memories. So it's more likely to last longer. And they have found that it reaches up to 25 minutes, this effect. They didn't test longer, so the effects could actually be longer, but you have to consider what you're priming them with. So consider, not just a smiley face, but say the word happy and a picture of a face, because then when we see them subliminally, the brain is already matching, okay, when I see this face, I see the word happy too. Or say, happy and a sad face. It still has to prime those two things together. So again, it goes to the hippocampus. And there has been a lot of neuroscience research looking at subliminal priming and the hippocampus when we pair stimuli. And it is really interesting. And it is a progressing field. And this is really where the field is flourishing. So right now, I don't think there is a simple answer to that question. Yes, it is effective. Right now, most of what we know is in marketing. And this is where that subliminal persuasion effect kind of lies. I think the issue with trying to get someone to feel a certain way towards you is there's too many other things to take into consideration, because there's prior relationships, there's reputation, there's all these other things. We already talked about, the temperature of the room. All those other things will have an effect on how you feel. So in a laboratory, we can say, I'm going to control for all those other things. And we just want to look at this subliminal persuasion. In the real world, I can't do that. Yeah. So that's why it is much, much harder to say for certain. But I do think that we will see some more answers to some really interesting questions within the next few years.
Well, I think that's still comforting, because the fact that now we know that we're not being subliminally influenced or manipulated just because of some, weird thing that people can do, that's comforting. Do you have a book recommendation? I mean, if people really like this topic, I know you said we're going to put a couple links to studies in the show notes that people can read. So if you found this topic fascinating, you wanted to know where Dr. Abbie got some of this knowledge.
Yep.
She'll have some studies in the show notes. But what about a book recommendation?
Yep. So a book recommendation would be Subliminal, How Your Unconscious Mind Rules Your Behavior. It's a fantastic book. Really good to get you into the field of subliminal persuasion. Like Chris said, I will have some references of academic studies if you want to kind of dive into the science of things. This book does go a bit into the science of things, but it's a lot more digestible for the everyday reader because, let's face it, academic studies aren't always the most enjoyable to read for everybody.
What?
So we'll have, I think so.
What? Not everyone reads them as bedtime stories to their kids? What do you mean?
It might help them fall asleep.
Yes, I think so. So we'll put a link to that book in the show notes also. And Abbie, if besides listening to this podcast, if people want to follow you, because I know we're going to be doing this every month now, a podcast like this, but what's the best way for people to kind of follow you and the new things that we're working on here?
So you can follow my Twitter, which is Abbie J. Maroño, my LinkedIn, which is Dr. Abbie Maroño, and my website, which is just abbiemaroño.com. And if you want to ask some questions, maybe there's some topics that you want to see, just, drop me a message on Twitter with a question, with some things that you really want to explore. And Chris and I will dive into those in one of the subsequent episodes.
Yes, please. And you can always do that too at my Twitter account, which is Human Hacker, or at the the SOC Engineer Inc. account for where we host a podcast. You can feel free to drop your questions or topics that you want to see there. And just in case you haven't noticed, we now have 4 different series of podcasts. So we have our original podcast where we just talk to interesting people in different fields outside of InfoSec and see how we can apply that to social engineering. We have our security awareness series, which we focus on how we can learn from a CISO or a CSO or someone who handles the security infrastructure of their organization and things that we can learn from them about being secure. We have this podcast, brand new, which will be delving into a different psychological topic every month. And then we have the SE Etc., which is just what it sounds like. We're going to be dealing with everything else that we haven't talked about throughout the month that might involve social engineering or human decision making or other topics like that. You can find them all on the social-engineer.org. They're hosted on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. And of course, we have the video versions on YouTube if you actually want to see what we look like. And if you don't, I understand that too. But you can check that out on YouTube. Next month, what are we talking about next month, Abbie? What's our topic?
Next month, this will be a very good one. We are talking about, can you fake it till you make it?
Oh, man.
So the psychology behind actually faking it till you make it.
I love it. That's going to be a great episode. Yep. So thanks for joining us for our inaugural episode of this podcast series. Can't wait to see you next month. Please leave us your comments, thoughts, and any other topics you want to hear in the comment section. But we'll talk to you next month. See you.